Welcome to the Doghouse. Have a listen as we take a look at life, love, and art in all its forms. Here's your host, the Rock Dog, Andrew Davis.
I am the Rock Dog, Andrew Davis. This is the Doghouse. Thought we'd start things off a little differently today. If you go back to the first episode, I did an interview with Jacob Gregory from Aurora Music Studio, and he produced Alana Clark. We're actually going to feature a couple of songs from Alana's EP called Dear June. We'll hear a song called Hurricane and the title track as well. If you want more information, simply Google Alana Clark Music. After that, my interview with a fourth-generation award-winning broadcaster and now a published author. We'll talk to Phelps in the Doghouse coming up.
I wish I was stronger, I was a fighter, I wish I was brave. You're just a stranger who's getting closer, I walk away. All of my demons tell me I'm sinking, there's no way out. Somebody help me, somebody hold me, somebody stay. Please stay. Will you catch me? I feel like I'm falling. Can you save me? I'm running faster than a freight train. Can you love me? 'Cause baby, I'm a hurricane. Dark side comes with the long and windy road. I wish I was louder, maybe a dreamer just for a day. Somebody help me, somebody hold me, somebody stay, please stay. June, do cigarettes. Dear June, are you still alive? Your walls are covered with love letters, save for another time. Oh, 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 hey. So you try to say, you stumble all over your words. I don't know why you hide it. You bury it under your skin. Oh, dear June, dear June, dear June. I hope you know I love you, dear June. Dear June, I'm reaching out. Your lungs are buried underwater. You can barely make a sound. You can hardly hold a whisper. Your legs are tired, can't keep up with the cityscapes, with the cityscapes. Oh, 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 hey. You try to say, you stumble all over your words. I don't know why you hide it. You bury it under your skin. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Oh, oh, oh. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Let me try to say, you stumble all over your words. I don't know why you hide it. You bury it under your skin. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Dear June, dear June, dear June. Well, I hope you know I love you. to pieces. You burn on your cigarette.
She is an award-winning fourth-generation broadcaster, and she is in the Doghouse today. We welcome to the show Ruth Phelps. Hello.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get right to the point with your name. It's obviously a nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that all come about?
That one actually has radio origins as well. So, Billy Brown Jr., who was one of the broadcasters in my family, came up with the name. There was an old radio show in the 1950s about a football player named Bruiser LaRue. And so he invented the name, and it just kind of stuck with my family.
What was it like growing up knowing that your grandparents were who they were? And the celebrity factor here in the Comox Valley that went with that?
You know, I don't know if I ever really fully, when I was younger, had as much of an understanding of how well known my papa was. He died so suddenly in 1990. So at the time I was 5, and I knew that his passing was maybe receiving more attention than the average person, but I wasn't really aware of the full scope until maybe when I was 14 or 15 and got into broadcasting myself and started being a little bit more interested in my family's broadcasting history. I really learned the lineage there and his time in Vancouver and about his father, Billy Brown Sr. But I don't, it's like when someone, I would imagine it would be like what someone feels when they're a twin and they get asked what's it like growing up being a twin. I don't really know any different. You know, it's just what was normal for me to be raised around the industry when I was a child.
Mm-hmm. And then when you found out, though, that you figured it all out, you put it together, we're fourth generation. I mean, we're going back to your great-grandfather in Vancouver.
Yeah, so Billy Brown Sr. Got into broadcasting in the late, I believe it was like 1930s or 1940s. He originally was selling crystal records or crystal radio sets back in the day, and then got into broadcasting. And then his show, Breakfast with Brown, was incredibly successful on CJOR in Vancouver back in the day. And at the time, Billy Jr. was appearing on his show as a character named Billy Fortune. And he would sort of do these live location broadcasts and things like that. And then when Billy Sr. passed away, Billy Brown Jr. took over. And obviously, because of the lineage there, Breakfast with Brown became the longest running radio show in North American history. And the Breakfast Club, actually, which is something you're very familiar with, went on to become the longest running radio contest in North American history as well. So I really got so excited about my family's history the more and more that I myself fell in love with broadcasting, and the more that my family allowed opportunities for me to become involved in broadcasting. Because naturally, you know, there was a lot of years where I was just too young to be as involved as I would have liked to have been. As young as I did start, I would have liked to have gotten started even sooner.
Aren't you like the youngest morning person ever? I don't know if that's true.
I think at certain points I definitely would have been the youngest morning host. I know I think I was the first female morning host in CHQB's history, and I was definitely the youngest morning host in the history of CHQB. And then probably as well on CFCP at various points, I think I was definitely one of the youngest morning hosts, that's for sure. It's not very common for someone to be in the 9th grade kind of doing what I was doing.
No. Most of them were working at Dairy Queen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you know you were going to do it? Like when you figured it out, did you just go, yeah, this is it. This is in my blood. Or did you go, well, maybe not?
I'm not really sure. I knew that I wanted to try. And I think all throughout grade 9 and the other years that I started working, to be honest, this is terrible to admit, but I think a lot of it came out of laziness. Like radio came natural to me. I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was readily available. I did see my friends busting their butts having to work other part-time jobs that they didn't enjoy. School really didn't appeal to me. I struggled a lot. I'm dyslexic. I was terrible at math. I kept getting held back and having to repeat certain courses. And radio was just the one place where I felt like I could be myself. So I don't ever remember having a moment where I decided to make that my career path. I think it essentially was just like, other stuff seems hard and this isn't for me.
You know, it's kind of funny because you describe it that way, but that's the exact reason I got into it when I was 18 years old.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's like other stuff seems less fun, less appealing, less exciting. Whereas, especially in morning show years, I wouldn't say that I always was excited to wake up. When you get into those hours when you're getting up at 3 a.m, that sucks.
Yes.
But I'll tell you right now, I never had a day in my life where I didn't want to be behind the microphone. Once I sat down at that desk, it's just like, man, this is where I was meant to be. This is what I'm meant to do. And making my family proud and continuing that lineage has always really meant a lot to me.
How many awards have you won? I know you probably you don't like talking about that, but I know you've won a handful in the radio industry.
Yeah, there's no non-jerky way to list off your awards, Andrew.
Pretty much.
I have won the On-Air Personality of the Year from the British Columbia Country Music Association twice, and I've won the On-Air Personality of the Year from the Canadian Country Music Association twice, and then Humanitarian of the Year from the British Columbia Country Music Association. And then I was nominated for that one a couple times as well, and then nominated for Music Director of the Year 5 times from the Canadian Country Music Association. So, yeah, a few.
It's an impressive list.
Well, thank you.
What led you out of radio? Was it ratings and they just gave you the boot, or did you figure, I've had enough, I want to do something else?
What ended up happening was it was a combination of things. At the time, I was dating a person who I felt was showing me a side of life that I had never experienced before. He had 2 young children, and I wanted to be able to focus more time and energy on that. And then in addition to that, it had been 7 years that I had been doing the morning show. I didn't have that period of my life where a lot of my girlfriends had, where they went to university and went away on spring break and had crazy adventures. I was just ready to try and see what else I could be in the world. And walking away essentially at the peak of my professional career was hands down the hardest thing I've ever done. But I was excited to write the book that I was working on, and I just wanted to find out what else was out there. And I think ultimately in my heart, I always knew that I wanted to go back. It was just a matter of when that would be realistic. And to be totally honest, getting back into radio has been so much harder than I thought it would be. Like, once I was done the book and I was ready to go back, it doesn't matter how many awards you've won or how great you think you are. You take yourself out of something, you're like anyone else. You get to start right back at the very beginning again. And that's the position that I'm in right now with the new radio job that I've just accepted. I get to go back in, and I'm super excited to start, but it's not a glamorous position, but that doesn't take away any of my passion for getting to re-enter the industry.
Absolutely. You're going to do evenings at Easy Rock in Kelowna, right?
Yeah, so I'm super excited for that. It's a really combined role. There's some production and a little bit of audio engineering and some writing and a few other things that I really love. So it combines quite a few different roles that I'm super jacked about.
What led you to write the book? Now, the book is called 11 Weeks, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, so I got dumped by that guy that I was so stoked on. And so originally I had been writing a fiction novel, but I decided to just start keeping a diary of how bad the breakup was and how much it was impacting me. And the diary essentially turned into the book 11 Weeks. And what happened was I read a study by a psychologist that says it takes on average 11 weeks for a broken heart to heal. And so I decided to do a real-time chronicling of that attempt to heal after the breakup. And that's where the book came from.
How does he feel about the book? Does he know?
Yeah, he knows. He was supportive of the idea off the hop. And then before I published it, I allowed him the opportunity to read the book, which he did. And the interesting thing about writing is Jordan Peterson, who I'm a huge fan of, he's a Canadian clinical psychologist and a renowned speaker, he basically says that writing is the most demanding form of thinking. And he says that, I understand it now, because when you are writing, you are forced to attribute meaning to that which you might not otherwise try and find a meaning for. So the ex-boyfriend's response when he read the book was essentially, it's the truth. Like, you've written the truth, you haven't lied, I appreciate that. Everything you've written is okay. But sometimes you inferred things from my actions or my words that I don't necessarily agree with, but kind of a moot point now. So he did give me his permission, and that was important to me because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't putting anything out there in the world that made another human feel bad.
Were you excited by the response? Were you surprised? Like when you released it and people actually were buying it?
Yeah, I was excited. I was terrified. I was surprised. The book goes some pretty dark places, and because it's not fiction and I write it as myself and I admit that this is me and these are thoughts or feelings that I've actually had, I almost didn't think anyone was going to read it. So when it happened and people started approaching me about some of the darker elements of the story, it was a lot. But it's been nothing but a resoundingly positive. And it's you look at all the stuff that I've done in my broadcast career, and I'm very proud of all of that. But I have to say, out of everything I've accomplished in my life, publishing that book is probably the thing that I'm most proud of.
Well, how your parents feel about it?
Yeah, what I ended up telling them was, originally I didn't want them to read it. Like, when the manuscript was finished, there's some intimate stuff with boys in there, and there's some low points that I wasn't exactly like jacked on handing over a copy to my mom and dad and being like, here, please sit down with this and give me your thoughts. So for a while I had told them I would appreciate if they didn't read it. And then when it came out, they were obviously very excited and proud and wanted to be supportive. So they called me and asked me if it was all right if they read it. And I said, yeah, I'll make you a deal. You guys can read it, but I don't want to discuss the content with you afterwards. And so that was pretty much where it ended. Like, if they read it, they didn't say anything afterwards, only explicitly because I had asked them not to. But I know they're very proud of me, and they were nothing but supportive through the whole process. My mom has a background in writing as well, and she really gets storytelling, and her help with dealing with, literary agents and the publishing process and books and structure was just invaluable during that time as well.
Take us back to when you were growing up, because you mentioned earlier about having the learning disability. What was it like for you in school?
It was not good. I wasn't a super cool kid by any means, but I wasn't an angel either. I mean, I got picked on, and as a result, I picked on other people. People were a jerk to me. I was a jerk to other people. I really struggled academically. And where I found my footing was in choir and in musical theater and in things like that and band. But short of those, it was really hard for me in classes like math and a little bit later, biology and those types of things. So I was nothing but relieved to not have to continue on with my education. And it was a really interesting time because in the early 2000s, I feel like all they did in school was push the idea that if you didn't go to post-secondary, you were going to be some low-level grunt worker, and that, education was the path to everything. But there wasn't as big of a push as, from what I understand, there is now to pursue trades or creative arts or not necessarily having to go that highly academic route. I don't have a single friend that I graduated with that I can think of that didn't go somewhere else or do something different. Everyone left Courtney and they all went away to school. My best friend, he moved away to university, and everyone was gone, and it was just me still working at the radio station. It was a hard feeling for me, but I'm so glad that I didn't allow myself to feel pressure to take on these massive student loans to go and pursue a career that ultimately wouldn't have made me happy anyways.
Exactly. And that's the way that I think more and more people are beginning to look at.
Yeah. No, and I just felt like I never fit in. That's not even necessarily socially, but the way that they taught and the things that they were trying to get me to do, it just never resonated with me. It never felt important. It never felt like this is something I'm going to need to know. Whereas where my head was at was books and stories and music and music history and singing and playing guitar, and that stuff really spoke to me, and nothing about the educational system enticed me at all.
What kind of advice would you give?
I think you just have to treat it like one of those things in life that, like, yeah, you got to get through it. You probably want to get your dogwood. You want to get your high school diploma, but just don't allow yourself to become one of those people who looks back and says high school was the best years of my life. God, I almost think there's nothing more tragic than that statement. Like, to me, it's just a period of time you got to get through to get the fundamentals down, and then stay true to whatever it is in the world that you do feel excited about and that calls to you and that makes you want to get up in the morning. Whatever that is, find a way to make that your profession and just go at it with all your heart. And don't be embarrassed or ashamed if other people are making more money or getting better educations. As long as you're happy with what you're doing, that's the only thing that matters.
You mentioned earlier about humanitarian awards and things that you've won. What is your charity at?
The Center for Epilepsy and Seizure Education in British Columbia. They're based out of Abbotsford, and they provide support and resources and information for family members and those living with epilepsy. And that's charity is just like the warmest, biggest part of my heart. It belongs to them. Everything that I do so that those people can continue to help people living with epilepsy.
You or?
No, so my best friend Keith, who actually lived right down the street from the radio station in Courtney when I was growing up, she had epilepsy, and she passed away from her epilepsy in July of 2010.
Oh.
And right up until the moment that she passed, I naively was not aware that you could pass away from epilepsy. I mean, I knew people would have a seizure and could, as a secondary result of a seizure, pass away. So if someone has a seizure in their bathtub, I understood that you could drown. If someone has a seizure at the top of the stairs, I understood that you could fall and hurt yourself. But I just never really knew that you could pass away just from epilepsy alone. And there's something called SUDEP, which stands for sudden and unexpected death in epilepsy. And essentially the way it was explained to me by a coroner is that SUDEP is to people with epilepsy as SIDS is to infants. They don't understand what causes it, but people with epilepsy can sometimes pass away in their sleep, a small percentage. And so that's exactly what happened to my best friend. And it changed my whole life, losing that person. And so that's why I've devoted as much time as I can to raising awareness and education.
I didn't know that. So I learned something new too. I had no idea.
Yeah, and the stigma surrounding epilepsy is still the one thing that everyone quote unquote knows about epilepsy is that if someone's having a seizure, you put something in their mouth so that they don't choke on their tongue. Well, that's not even true. Like, you put your hand in the mouth of someone who's having a seizure, the force with which they're biting down could take your fingers clean off at that point. Yeah. So there's so much misinformation. There is still a stigma that goes with it. And I will be the first one to admit, it is terrifying to see someone have a seizure. If you've never witnessed it before, the physical act of it is horrifying. And because of that, the stigma that goes with it is that people are afraid of people living with epilepsy. People, sometimes if they're in a state of what they call an aura, where they're about to have a seizure, they can appear drunk or disoriented or, be misperceived as being high. So a lot of times people that have epilepsy aren't getting the help that they need when they're struggling. So just creating awareness about it and recognizing that, there's no cognitive impairment that goes hand in hand with epilepsy. There's, a lot of people with epilepsy that are leading, by all accounts, healthy, wonderful, fulfilling lives. They just happen to have seizures sometimes, and you don't have to be scared of them. And there's some really easy ways that you can help them.
And right now you're writing a second book, correct?
Yes, I am writing my second book. It's finished now, and I just sent it off to the editor in New York last night. The second book is titled Interlude, and essentially it writes about the period of time after the first book ended and before I go back to radio, which I go back to radio on Wednesday, so quite soon. So it kind of captures this interlude of my life, this unique period of time where I was in between having someone to love and having a career that I love. And now what is your life about if you strip away doing the thing that you believe you were put on this earth to do? And if nobody loves you romantically, then who are you? What do you do? So that's kind of the gist of the second book.
Congratulations to all of your success, or on all of your success. Claim that you didn't really work at it, but I think you did. I mean, you got up every day, you went to work, you created your craft, you found content, you found a way to reach and touch people. And it's something that your grandfather said to me that I have always remembered to this day. When I started, I was about 18 years old, and your grandpa pulled me aside and said this: just remember this, radio is people talking to people. And that's it. And that always stuck with me.
Thank you. Yeah, it means a lot to me that you remember that quote of his, because that was something that so encapsulates how I remember him. And in fact, when my mom had her radio show, that's why her show was called People to People. And I think you're right. I appreciate your kind words, but I think just as long as people do continue talking to people, there's always going to be radio and always going to be great opportunities for people to tell wonderful and beautiful stories. And stories are the most universal thing on the planet. They're what connects us, right? When we hear someone else's story and feel the feelings, it makes us feel not so alone with everything we're going through. So
I'll end on this question here. If you can give us a couple of early memories that really stand out with your Nana and Papa.
With my papa, I used to go into the old radio station on Cliff Avenue there in Courtney. It had the blue shag carpet,
Yep.
in the foyer. And the booth was right out front. It had this big window like a fishbowl. And I remember as a kid just wandering in there and looking at him through the window, and he'd have the record players going. And back then he could smoke in the booth. And he would just like wave a hand to me from the studio, and it would just like cut through the cigarette smoke in the air. And I can see him so clearly in my mind doing that show and being where he loved to be. And then with my Nana, I couldn't pick one distinct memory of her. She very much was like a second mother figure to me in my life. We spent so much more time than is normal together for a granddaughter and a grandma, I think, simply because we worked together and she lived next door to us. So I remember just the thing I think of most when I think of my Nana is the way that she would say, "I love you" on the phone, which I know sounds really cheesy and lame, but every time I talked to her on the phone, I would say, "Okay, Nana, I'll talk to you later. I love you." And most people, when they do that, oh, sorry, I'm getting emotional. Most people, when they do that, will just say it really quickly back, like, "Oh, I love you too." But she would always just stop and say, "I love you too." And she said it like she meant it every time. And that was just the best feeling in the world. I miss her. I miss her so much because she was always the backbone of what I was trying to do and such an important part of my family, and just trying to make her proud and do the best that I could at radio I was the luckiest kid to have had her in my life.
They both were a big influence on me as well and impacted my life in a huge way, getting into radio when I was 18 and basically doing that for the next 30 years. So I owe them as well.
Oh, that's so rad. That's so neat to hear because, yeah, I know that was all my Nana and Papa ever wanted was to see radio continue and see people's passion for music and communication continue. And I know that it always made my Nana really proud when you'd tell her, "Oh, you know, so-and-so who used to work here, they wound up doing this or they went there and now they're doing that." She always loved hearing stories about where broadcasters she had the pleasure of meeting wound up. So that means a lot. I really appreciate it, Andrew.
Where can you find your books?
RuePhelps.com has the link, and the first one's available on Amazon currently, and the second one will be added in the fall.
I thank you very much for joining us today in the Dawg House, and I'm going to give you good luck, even though you're not going to need it at Easy Rock. You're going to get such amazing ratings that they're going to go, "Why we got this girl on the evenings? We need her out front." I guarantee it.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, Andrew.
The Dawg House is available where you find podcasts, including Spotify, Google Play, and Apple. The music at the beginning of the show, again, was Alana Clark from her EP, Dear June. You can learn more at Alana Clark Music to search for her on Google. You can also find me on Facebook. Dawg, of course, is DAWG.
You've been listening to The Dawg House with Andrew Davis.